Would like to let me start over. It is Monday, May 8th, 2023, and I'd like to welcome everyone to SACOG's Policy and Innovation Committee meeting. Thank you to our commissioners and to staff and any public for joining us today, and also our consultants. Greatly appreciate it. So before we move on to the Pledge of Allegiance, I will have Jessica, who is hosting us today, handle all the logistics for our meeting.
Sure, thank you. Good morning. Just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. For those online who wish to make a public comment, please see the top of the agenda for your options. For our committee members, please remember to mute your devices when you are not speaking and use the raise hand feature, which is located underneath the reactions button if you'd like to make a comment.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And at that, will you please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance
to the flag.
Let's wait for the flag here. There we go. All right, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Always a good way to start the day. All right, may we have the roll call, please, Jessica?
Yes, please let me know you're here with a verbal response when I say your name. Director Desmond.
Here.
Thank you. Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Hudeshelt.
Here.
Zaragoza.
Here.
Schaefer. Absent. Stallard.
Here.
Vang. Absent. Villegas.
Here.
Vice Chair Burris.
Here.
And Chair Thomas.
Here, thank you. Any public communication at this point?
There's no public comment
Okay.
right now.
All right, wonderful. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Do any directors have any comments or changes to the consent calendar? And I assume there's no public comment on the consent calendar?
Hudeshelt moves consent.
And no public comment.
Do I hear a second?
Second. Desmond.
All right, roll call, please, on the consent calendar.
Desmond.
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Hudeshelt.
Aye.
Zaragoza.
Aye.
Schaefer. Absent. Stallard.
Aye.
Vang. Absent. Villegas.
Aye.
Vice Chair Burris.
Aye.
And Chair Thomas.
Aye, thank you.
Motion passes.
So with that, we are on advocacy update, and Christina is going to lead us through an update on federal and state advocacy activities. Good morning, Christina.
Hey, good morning, Chair. I think first we're going to do an action item for our federal lobbying services.
You know what? I apologize. I moved my agenda too far to the top. We sure are. We're on item number 4. Boy, I'm off to a great start today. We're going to approve the federal advocacy contract extension. So we have Renee leading us through that. My apologies.
No problem. And I'm actually stepping in for Renee. So you're still
perfect.
the right person. So thank you. And yeah, this item is to complete a third year of service for our federal lobbying contracts. Just a quick little bit of background. Our contracts with our federal lobbyists are structured as 2 separate but identical contracts. We have one with Capital Transportation Consulting and then one with Pavlicek and Associates. We initially entered into our contracts with them in April of 2021. They were structured as 1-year contracts with the allowance for extensions through March of 2026. After 1 year, last March, we extended the contract for another year using James's signature authority. That put us to March of this year. We extended the contracts again using James's authority, but at that point we hit the $100,000 limit for him to sign contracts. And so that got us through December of this year. So this item is really just to allow us to complete that third full year and get us through March of 2024 with our federal lobbyists. And then we will be coming back in February of next year to consider a 4th year of service for our 2 federal lobbying contracts.
All right, thank you, Christina. And Director Vang, I just wanted to welcome you. Thanks for being with us this morning. Are there any directors that have any questions or comments on this item? Okay. I actually do have a question. So Christina, can you kind of fill me in on, you said they this one contract, but there are two distinctions. What's the difference between the two firms in terms of advocacy?
Sure. So when they initially went through the bidding process, they applied jointly to do a joint services for us. So we've got Devin Barnhart with Capital Transportation, and then Jason Pavlicek with Pavlicek Consulting. And they just have their own independent firms, but they work together pretty equally, working together with us for our federal services. But the way that they're structured is they each have their own firm.
Do they each have a different specialty that they advocate for us, or are both firms advocating jointly? I guess I'm saying, do we need two firms rather than just one on the federal advocacy side?
So they really fill in with various, I'm sorry, Eric, it looked like you had a.
I was just going to add a little bit of context too, because I was on the review panel when we interviewed them. And so this might be a question that some of you are having. Their prices when combined are essentially that they were still the lowest price firm of those that we interviewed. So we're not double paying essentially for the same services, if that's an underlying question.
That was an underlying question, but once again, do they bring different specialties in
Yes.
terms of their purview?
Yeah, so they both have a little bit of different backgrounds. Devin has experience working on the Hill. Jason has experience working on a number of transportation issues as well, with a specialty background in shared mobility, but also other transportation issues. So they each bring a different lens, but both come from transportation backgrounds. And it's been, I think, very helpful to have the two of them because they both have different relationships. And so that always is helpful. I think, when we're dealing with federal issues, they've got different people that they can get information from.
That's really helpful context, because certainly the Hill is so complex that I can see how that could be a benefit. So just kind of wanted to understand more of what we're getting from these two contracts. Great. Any other director comments or questions at this point? All right. Is there any public comment? Jessica?
There's no public comment.
All right. I will bring this back to the board for action.
This is Director Zaragoza. I would move that we approve the extension of the contract. And again, I'll just underscore as well. I've always been a big believer in having these services for us. I think in the age of competitive grants and just, having our place, next to LA and the Bay Area, as well as all the other huge metropolitan players across the nation, that it's important for us to have, that extra layer of assistance. But, maintaining that, we need to also see results of that relationship. But I do think it's very important, and I'm happy to make the motion.
Thank you, Director Zaragoza.
I'm happy to second, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Dr. Stollard, second. Thank you. Roll call, please.
And Madam Chair, just to the motion, I just want to say that I appreciate your asking the questions about the duplicity of that and getting that ironed out. And I do agree with Michael Zaragoza as well. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. All right. Roll call, please.
Desmond,
Aye.
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Hudeshelt,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Schaefer, absent, Stallard,
Aye.
Vang,
Yes.
thank you, Villegas.
Aye.
Vice Chair Burris
Aye.
and Chair Thomas.
Aye. Thank you.
Motion-
Motion carries. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Motion carries unanimously. All right. Thank you all. With that, we move on to item number 5, adopt the final budget and overall work program for fiscal year 2023-24. Good morning, Loretta.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Thomas, and good morning, directors. Give me just 1 second to start my presentation here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning again. So SACOG, as a federally designated metropolitan planning organization, is required to develop an overall work program and budget annually. The overall work programs includes projects that support the Sacramento 6-county region and also SACOG core planning activities and projects that support SACOG's strategic plan with the triple bottom line principle: equity, economy, and environment. Just a quick overview of the budget and OWP development timeline. Staff submitted a draft OWP and budgets to federal agency and Caltrans for review and comments back in March, and staff received comments back from Caltrans and federal agency in April. At the April board meeting, both authorized the release of the draft budget and OWP for public comments. So far, no comments has received from the public. So for the action in May, staff is seeking board approval to adopt the budgets for fiscal year 2023-24 and submission of the budgets to Caltrans and federal agency for approval. So I'm going to highlight some of the key changes for the final budgets comparing to the draft budgets. So the budget has a net change or a decrease of $429,000 or 1.1% comparing to the draft budgets. It reflected a reduce of revenue of approximately $1.2 million. This is mainly due to the reductions of the race grant revenue to account for the required local cash match of $452,000. And also the change in the accounting for the CVR safe staffing costs of approximately $740,000. The CVR safe staff costs are now excluded from SACOG budget, and it's only accounted for in the CVR safe budgets. It also increased the use of the SACOG managed fund of approximately $729,000. And this includes the cash match of $452,000 for the race grant, and then also increase in the SACOG managed funds for projects that are committed for the community design programs. Expenditures reduced approximately $429,000. And then obviously the final budget reflected comments from partners, which includes the state and local agency and federal agency. There's no fiscal impact to the budget comparing to the draft budgets that were presented to Caltrans and federal agency. It was just mainly some minor updates to the overall work programs, project descriptions, and also timeline and deliverables. Here's just a quick overview of the budgets for fiscal year 2023-24. SACOG combined budgets for the operations, board and advocacy budgets of approximately $37.5 million. The budget only reflects revenue related to SACOG operations, with the exceptions of the one-time funding of the REAP housing program and also the Green Means Go that are passed through to member agency. SACOG budget and OWP is funded with a combination of formula, grants, and member dues of approximately $35.4 million, and also includes the use of various fund balance of $2.1 million. This includes approximately $500,000 of TDA carryover funds and $400,000 of the unassigned fund balance for committed cash match for grants and ongoing projects and activity, such as the blueprint, the racial equity action plan implementations, REAP housing support, regional trail plans implementation, and the Greens mobility zone activities. As noted, also included SACOG managed funds for the community design project and also require cash match for the race grant. This includes of approximately $14.7 million, $16.5 million of regional projects and past due costs, and also consulting and other costs of approximately $6.3 million. Here's just a quick overview of the combined revenue summary for the fiscal year. Total revenue is anticipated to be 35.4 million, a decrease of approximately 1.2 million compared to the draft budgets, and also includes the use of fund balance of approximately 2.1 million, as I noted earlier. Federal revenue makes up approximately 34% of the total revenue. State revenue is approximately 46%. This includes the REAP housing program and also Green Means Go. As noted earlier, these are the one-time funding that are passed due to member jurisdictions for the development of the housing elements and also the support to the infill development in the green zone. The board has approved a total of approximately 34.5 million in planning and capital structure funding to support the infill housing development throughout the Sacramento region. So that's for the Green Means Go program, and these will be programmed into the budget in the fiscal year 2023-24, and then also in the following budget program years. Local revenues are and then membership due and other revenue is 4% of the total budgets. There's also a quick overview of the expenditures by category. Total expenditure is approximately 37.5 million, a decrease of 429,000 compared to the draft budget. And then also an increase of 3.6 million comparing to fiscal year 2022-23 budgets. Past due and consulting costs is approximately 54% of the budget. As noted earlier, these are one-time funding that is related to the REAP housing program and also the Green Means Go. Total staffing costs, salary and benefits is approximately 34% of the budget, a decrease of approximately 1.1 million compared to the draft budgets. This is mainly related to the change in accounting for the CVR safe staffing costs and also some saving related to the staff turnover for senior staff and replacement with some of the prep staff. Staff has addressed the board questions related to the staff and benefits in the staff report, so I'm not going to go into detail with that, but if there's any questions, happy to answer it. Indirect costs and other costs makes up 12% of the budgets. For more information, please refer to attachment B, which is a summary of revenue and expenditures that are broken out by functional areas, which includes SACOG operation budgets, board and advocacy budget, and CVR safe budgets. Attachment E is the expenditure by project, and then also attachment F provide a summary of revenue and expenditures and estimated fund balance for the planning and administration funds. This concludes staff presentations, and happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Loretta. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate you for getting to this point. This is always a milestone when this work is done and our committee is ready to give its blessing for final action for the board. So congratulations on getting us to this point. I see
Thank
a
you.
question from Director Stollard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Loretta, could you review the status of the fund balance for us?
Oh, yes, sorry. Okay, let me just put that up. Right, sorry, I don't have a slide there, but let me just provide that information. Sorry, I have multiple screens going on here.
There's a lot in this document.
Okay, so let me just pull up the information. So basically, based on what we estimated, the fund balance is approximately 5.6 million of unassigned fund balance as of June 30th, 2023, which is ending of this fiscal year.
I think you've frozen, Loretta.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me see. Let me just turn off my camera, just maybe it will be a little better here. Sorry about that. Hang on.
Right, so is there more than to Director Stoller's question?
Hang on. Sorry.
Okay, great.
Sorry, so yeah, so basically, as I noted earlier, can you hear me okay now?
Yes, we can. Thank
Okay,
you.
sorry. So the fund balance is estimated to be approximately 5.6 million at end of June 30th, 2023. So this includes, the various assigned reserve of 3.7 million fund balance, and then we're going to be board staff is asking to use 400,000 of that into fiscal year 2023-24 to continue the support of the ongoing activities and projects. So I don't know if that answers your question, Director Stoller.
I need refreshment every now and then, so I keep track of what we're doing.
Okay.
How does fund balance work with reserves? Are they different categories?
So yes, so it's it all combined as fund balance, but then on the way it works is some of the reserve balance, meaning that those are restricted for activities. For example, the SACOG managed funds, that is also part of the fund balance that is used reflected of the total of the 21 million that is showing as an estimate there. However, that is restricted just for any activity that is being approved by the board that is related to the community design programs or other projects that may be approved by the board. So it cannot be used as SACOG operation activities.
So after we allocate this 2.2 million of fund balance, we'll have a 3.7 million left, did you say?
No, so the 2.1 million total fund balance, that includes approximately 1.2 million of the SACOG managed funds that funded for the community design projects that is that staff is bringing forward in May. And then also includes approximately about 520,000 of that is committed for the race grant cash match that the board approved back in March. So that is different from the 5.6 million that I was referring to.
Okay, you're throwing a lot of numbers at me, can't do too well with it, to be honest. But only thing I'm concerned about is, are we consuming our fund balance at a reasonable rate so that they're being replenished, or are we starting to dip a little heavily into them and possibly going to be shorter in the out years? That's really the thrust of my inquiry.
And Madam Chair, maybe I could add in a little bit of context, just going back to some board policies. So as Loretta was making reference to, the SACOG board has established a SACOG managed fund that is largely used for transportation projects. And so as she referenced, there's the raise match, as well as when we go through the regional funding round, the small non-competitive grants, because those are so difficult for smaller jurisdictions to federalize, we allow some small $100,000 level grants out of the SACOG managed fund. So technically, from an accounting perspective, it's counted as part of our fund balance, but for SACOG operational purposes, those are really grants for transportation projects. So the numbers that Loretta was throwing at you, a lot of that is coming from those grants to transportation projects, and then there's some amount that is actually coming from our unassigned fund balance. That's what you would call our reserve fund, if that helps.
Thank you, Eric. I'm just, want to make sure we're being prudent as we go forward and not overconsume our reserves. Thank you.
Totally.
Excellent question.
And maybe for a future meeting, we can bring back the fund balance policy and kind of put all the numbers down in writing, so it's a little bit clearer for you.
Yeah, there's some of us are new, some of us have been for a long time. All of us will benefit from that review. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Thank you so much to both of you. Director Hadeschelt.
Yeah, and thank you, Director Stoller. That was helpful to me as a newbie and trying to consume all these numbers and figure out where they all go. A fairly simple question. The FY 22-23 budget as amended what was the previous budget and what was the amendment? Is that the 459,000 that you're talking about, or? And we don't have to go into a deep dive. Maybe I can take it offline, but I'm curious if it was $1 million more than it is now, or, you know, order of magnitude, what the difference was with the adopted FY 22-23 budget versus the amended one.
So, so let's see, so the fiscal year 22-23 budget reflects the amendment number 3, which was approved by the board in April. So that is the latest budgets for the current fiscal year. When you were mentioning the comparison of the changes, so the increase from the last fiscal year to the final budget for fiscal year 23-24, there is a total increase of approximately, I'm sorry, let me just pull that up again. It's approximately 3.6 million total in expenditures that is increased comparing to fiscal year 22-23 to 23-24. So the increase is mainly that is a combination of staff cost increases and also increase in the past due funds that is related to the Green Means Go projects.
Does that answer your question, Dr. Hushel?
It does.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Are there any other director comments or questions on this action item? All right, any public comment, Jessica?
There's no public comment.
All right, we'll bring this back for action then. Do I hear a motion?
Zaragoza moves.
Diego second.
For a second.
Excellent. Roll call, please.
Director Desmond,
I see a thumbs up.
Aye,
Thank you.
sorry, I was having some technical problems.
all right, thank you for that. Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Hudashelt,
Aye.
Zaragoza,
Aye.
Schaefer, absent, Stallard,
Aye.
Bang,
Yes.
Villegas,
Yes,
Vice Chair Burris,
Yes.
and Chair Thomas.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Excellent. Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
Appreciate your comments. And thank you, Loretta. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, with that, we move on to our information items, number 6, which is our advocacy update. Christina.
Hi, thank you. So we're going to do 2 things today. Talk a little bit about Cap to Cap and debrief on how Cap to Cap went. I know a few of you were there from SACOG staff. We had 2 staff members go. We're going to hear from one of them today. And then we will hear from Chris Lee, our state lobbyist with Politico Group, who will provide an update on our state advocacy work this past month. So we'll start with Cap to Cap. Renee DeVere Oki and Christina Svensk attended Cap to Cap for us this year, and Christina's here to do a little bit of a recap, and then hopefully we can hear from some of the board members who attended as well.
Right. Nice to see you again, Christina. Good morning.
Nice to see you too. Good morning. Yes, see a lot of familiar faces. Hopefully we've all recovered from that trip. We were a handful of 400 people that traveled to DC this year. I think it was a really great, productive trip. Really exciting to have Janet Yellen come talk to us. It was a pretty interesting year this year. So, you know, as many of you know, we met with a lot of different Congress people and committees. I know Bara and Matsui were 2 meetings that I heard all around were really good discussions across all of the different teams. I know definitely the one I was in for transportation. We had a chance to meet with Lamalfa's office and Kylie's office, Garamendi's. I know there's probably a ton that happened that I wasn't aware of or part of. But we also got to speak with Senator Padilla's office, and I know a few folks met with Senator Feinstein's office, and then some committees like Senate Committee for Environment and Public Works and the House T&I Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. So lots of really good discussions, and I just want to hit on some of the main themes from the meetings that I attended or some feedback that I heard from others. Really, one of the big ones that I heard was regional coordination and collaboration for large grants. So we overwhelmingly heard, particularly on the transportation side, that regions should really start focusing on aligning priorities and projects to kind of be more strategic with grants. The US DOT, as we all know, have so many more grant programs now through IIJA. And so they're receiving a lot of applications and it's becoming somewhat overwhelming. But really what they're seeing is a lot of competition within singular regions. And so they really want, they're trying to shift regions to think about more collaborative asks and make stronger, more regionally focused projects. Which is timely considering we're going to be talking with the Strategic Planning Committee today about that topic. And it's something that will be coming in front of committee and board probably in the upcoming months as well as we start to kind of figure out how we should do that. We also heard a lot about implementation of IIJA. That was a big talking point. Number of meetings. We heard that developing programs and taking advantage of that funding is of great interest. They really want to see that funding get into the regions and move through the regions. We had some good discussions about the RAISE grant and how that's about to get started, but also how things like carbon reduction program funding and PROTECT funding and some of the other new sources that are coming out of IIJA can help us with some of our current and ongoing efforts. There was also a lot of focus on resiliency for fire and flood. Including creating evacuation corridors, planning for evacuation, and infrastructure needs along those corridors. I think this past winter probably brought a lot of that to light, as well as the summers we've been experiencing. So we were able to discuss our emergency preparedness plan with some of the folks that we had meetings with, which addresses that, but also have some new conversations about how we can leverage some of the new IIJA programs like PROTECT to help with implementation of that. So those were kind of the big things that we captured. I was solely with transportation. I know that there is a debrief this Friday, an official debrief with the chamber. So I'm sure we're gonna get a lot more information out of that. We could probably distribute any kind of summaries that come out of that. But as Christina mentioned, I'd love to hear what some of the members of this committee want to add, because I know there are a number of us there that all had different conversations. So would love to hear your insights as well.
Really appreciate that great update, Christine. It was great to see you back in Washington. And I know Director Stollard was there. You were always a fixture and a crowd favorite, Director Stollard. Would you like to offer any insights on your trip this year to Cap to Cap?
Thank you. First of all, if anyone in this panel hasn't gone, it's certainly a very valuable opportunity to get more connected with the federal government. Before I started going, I used to feel like it was such an exalted place. You know, there's a saying, the only thing Olympian is the columns out front. It's a real world place. And it's just great to walk the halls, get in those offices, interact with staff, and get a feel for the fact that they're just people like us. And we have a right to ask for what we want, and we should be there and make those asks. Woodland had one private meeting at FHWA, which I felt, Department of Transportation, which I felt was so helpful. The person on the other side of the table said, we hardly ever get to see anybody. And that's exactly why you want to be there. You're looking them in the face, they get to know you, you get to know them, you get their card and you can call them in the future. So that was a very useful meeting for our community. Also, we're working on a flood problem that's been around forever, and meetings on that subject were also very, very fruitful. Again, I was on the Civic Amenities Task Force. I kind of call it the WUS committee because we don't really work very hard. We just go and look at things and get educated. The subject this year was up on the roof. So we visited rooftops, including some major new development. I was very intrigued. There's about a 7-acre development, basically north of Union Station. I forget the name of the project, but it's near Massachusetts Avenue. And the developers have spent $900 million building 2 massive office buildings with a beautiful rooftop terrace, which is why we were there. But the thing that was so intriguing about it is they had to deck over Interstate 395. So they were basically given the airspace, but they themselves had to pay the $100 million necessary to do the decking. I thought that was interesting because we've always assumed that government has to pick up the bill in Sacramento. In fact, it may end up being that way if we ever do anything over I-5. But it was great to see it. We also went to a restaurant on the roof and, you know, wonderful perspectives of a community. Any of us know when we're in our high buildings, how fun it is to look out and see around. But I can't think of many rooftop venues yet in the Sacramento area. So that's something to think about. The last thing I'll say is I'm always bowled away by the marvelous transportation projects in Washington, including the integration of bike share, which I took 2 bike rides, one 2 hours and one 1 hour on bike share. And the cost was $7.40 for 2 hours and $2.40 for the 1 hour. It was really very, very cool to get around that way. Besides the metro, besides ready availability of cabs and Ubers and the like. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And what Tom didn't mention for those of you who haven't been or haven't had a chance is Tom leads a nighttime walking tour of the monuments that starts at about 9 o'clock and finishes about 1 in the morning. And you see all the monuments at night on foot, up close and personal. And sometimes you're the only group in the, you know, Washington, the Jefferson Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial, and it brings you to your knees. It's my favorite part of Cap to Cap. And Director, how long have you been doing that, Director Stollard?
Well, thank you, Wendy, for the bouquet. I started 20 years ago after a dinner, one of the dinners that I have on Saturday night. And the truth is, you know, you tend to eat late in Washington. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not used to eating late. And I don't like to go to bed on a full stomach. So Rob Kurth and I basically just took off walking across the mall, and it went from there, expanded to the point where now we really do it. It's a 6-mile circuit. And we leave at 9:30 and get back at 12:30 to 12:45. And we walk through the door at 12:37. So the group says they call it a forced march because I walk fast. But the fact is, if I don't walk fast, we're not going to get home.
And
Until
Director Stollard is quite a historian. It's not to be missed. So thank you so much. I know
Chair
Director
Thomas,
said-
could it?
Yes.
Yeah, if I could just pick up on what Director Stollard said. You know, we were in a meeting with the Department of Transportation. There must have been 25 of us in that meeting. But as Director Stollard said, you know, they're folks just like us. One of the aha moments for me was meeting Lindsay Triba, who is a public affairs specialist for the Federal Transit Administration, who's from Dixon, California, and knows people that I know. So, you know, making those connections is incredibly invaluable, along with getting the, you know, the updates on where things are. And of course, we were there at, you know, debt ceiling 1.0, and this week debt ceiling 2.5 is going on back in Washington. So, you know, it was really informative. So those relationships are important, as Director Stollard said. They are folks just like us. So
Excellent. I know Director Dowden Calvillo and Burris and Villegas were there. Desmond, is there anyone else there? And does any other director have anything else to add to the Cap to Cap update? And I think I'll personally just echo what Christina and Director Stollard were both saying, is the importance of regional collaboration. And I was on the water resources team. We talked a lot about resiliency measures as well. And prior years at Cap to Cap, I have seen the efforts and our ask as more siloed, and more there is a realization and a recognition that we're a system, whether it's transportation, whether it's water delivery, you know, what the flooding issues that you experience down in the Sacramento Valley, you know, have a large impact as to what happens up in our county, in the El Dorado County and the headwaters. So we need to look at our systems and bring a systems approach to any investments that we make. And that's an exciting, I think, shift in thinking and in collaboration that is going to bring, I think, large rewards for our region in the years to come. So that's exciting. All right. Any other comments? Oh, Director Villegas.
maybe it's not the appropriate time, but at some point, it sounds like staff has heard repeatedly now that these regional prioritizations are going to be critical or essential in leveraging resources and funding. And I just wondered if maybe as a future agenda item, staff might be able to frame for this committee in the event that there's a role for this committee to play in helping that along. Because if that is in fact the case, it's important that we begin that process in whatever format that looks like. And so I've heard that now a couple of times. I know James has talked about it. And so to the extent that we need to be talking about regional prioritization, much like you just mentioned, I wondered if this committee has a role in that. If it does, then maybe that's something we need to talk about, and so that we begin to sort of, lay the groundwork for what that might look like so that we are successful in the very near future. So thank you.
Excellent. Comments from staff?
Yeah, thank you, Director Villegas. Actually, this topic came up at our strategic planning committee of the board meeting in February, and that's the current board chair, vice chair, committee chairs, and the former board chairs. They meet quarterly. And it had so much discussion actually in February that we are bringing it back to that committee this afternoon when it meets. And we're actually hearing from Georgia Gann Dorman at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, our sister agency in the Bay Area, who has gone through a process of actually prioritizing different projects for different federal grant programs. So we'll run through that this afternoon, see what the committee's desire is, but certainly that will not be the last. That this is early on, and I think this committee definitely it is definitely in your purview to be thinking about this, so we can bring that topic back at a future meeting.
Thank you for keying that up, Director Villegas. Perfect timing. All right, so no more comments on cap to cap. We'll move on to Chris Lee and your advocacy update. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Supervisor Thomas, members of the committee. Chris Lee with Politico Group, here to do a brief state advocacy update. So today I'm going to talk about three things: our sponsored bill, AB 350, some updates on Brown Act related legislation, and then, because we're about to enter a really pivotal point, an update on the state budget process. So starting out with AB 350, as a reminder, this is the bill that changes the timeframe for the SCS update to align with the Bay Areas and be much closer to the San Joaquin Council of Governments timing for their update. We're through the policy committee process and referred to the appropriations committee. As of just this morning, we're set for Wednesday, May 10th in the appropriations committee, and the best information we have at the moment is that it's a do pass recommendation rather than going on to the suspense file where all the bills are basically considered in bulk. And so that would be a very positive development. We'd be on the assembly floor and well in advance of the deadline to move on to the Senate for further policy committee review. I think the biggest hurdle that bill faces is really just making sure that the administration and especially the Air Resources Board are comfortable with the revised schedule. And so we've been having ongoing conversations with Assemblymember Aguiar Curry's office, as well as staff from the Air Resources Board, trying to make them comfortable with the bill, talking about potential language that could make sure that we're really showing the value of making this change. And it's not just, moving the deadline for the sake of moving a deadline. And so I think our advocacy trip last month with San Joaquin COG and MTC really helped drive the point home to both policy folks in the legislature, as well as key folks in the State Transportation Agency, Office of Planning and Research, and others, Strategic Growth Council in particular, about the value of what SACOG's trying to do with this bill. It's not just moving the deadline, it's really syncing up with our broader priorities across the Northern California mega region. So we'll have more updates on that after this week, but pleased with the trajectory and so far, and hopefully we'll be straight to the assembly floor without going to the suspense file. I'll talk briefly now about open meetings legislation, because SACOG weighed in on a couple bills that were considered in the Assembly Local Government Committee. I guess it's now a week and a half ago. The first one that was supported by SACOG was AB 557 HART. This is sponsored by the Special Districts and the League of Cities, as well as CSAC, the County Association. And this really just eliminates the sunset provisions in a prior bill that allows for online meeting, including online participation by the public and board members during a state of emergency. So that was heard in Assembly Local Government and passed out of the committee on a unanimous vote. Unfortunately, the other bill that SACOG weighed in support, AB 817 by Assemblymember Pacheco, did not advance. And so this was a bill that was going to make some broader ongoing changes to committees like this one that are advisory to the governing board. Unfortunately, the author and the committee could not come to agreement on amendments. So this bill is parked in the Assembly Local Government Committee for this year. And so that one was sponsored by the Parks Districts and the League of Cities. They were glad to have SACOG support, especially given, the important role that Assemblymember Aguilar Curry has. But unfortunately, that bill just isn't proceeding for this year.
Chris, on that one real fast, do you know what some of the hangups were in terms of the language that they wanted to have some of the amended language? Just wondering for future. So if we do have to discuss this bill next year, what some of those concerns might be and how we can interact with our legislative delegation.
Yeah, I think if you look at the analysis, there's a lot of folks from sort of good governance groups, as well as newspaper publishers and others who are really concerned about transparency. And the arguments that they were making was, look, we just created some of these flexibilities related to when there's good cause for absences in the prior year. That legislation has only been in effect since January. Let's not broaden this right now. And so I haven't seen yet the specific amendments that were requested. I'll definitely reach out to the sponsors and see what they're able to share. But the discussion in the committee analysis is a good place to start, and we can make sure that you see that afterwards.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, challenging.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then finally, I'll talk a little bit about budget, because that's going to be the big topic of discussion for really the next 5 weeks here in Sacramento. And so just last week, the Assembly and the Senate passed a package of current year budget tweaks. Nothing super relevant to SACOG. There were some minor changes to the current year budget bill, child care trailer bill, provisions related to the taxation of student loan forgiveness, and then a distressed hospital loan program, as well as some cleanup for some legislation related to farm worker unionization that was agreed to last year with the between the administration and the proponents of that. So those are the only anticipated early action items that we're expecting. And so we're really now about to enter kind of high gear on budget season. And so to put that in a little bit of context, I want to talk a little bit about the current revenue situation, some of the very focused on transportation and transit issues that are out there being discussed. The Senate's proposed Protect Our Progress plan and the governor's quick reaction to that, all setting us up for, on either Thursday or Friday this week, an anticipated revision to the governor's January budget. And so talking a little bit about the revenue situation, the April revenues continue to be weak. So for the first 9 months of the current fiscal year, we're about $4.5 billion off of the projections for general fund revenue. So not as dire perhaps as it could be, but certainly not a great situation going into the May revision. So we'll see more. The May revise is really the governor's chance to update his January budget with a lot more knowledge about what the revenue trends are going to be. In advance of that, one of the topics that has been receiving a lot of coverage is the fiscal cliff, folks are calling it, for transit operators. And really included in your packet a summary of a recent budget hearing, really delving into this topic and the Senate side, as well as the request from the California Transit Association for relief. So as federal funds related to COVID-19 relief are drying up, operators around the state have a short or longer runway, depending on their own situation, or if they're heavily sales tax funded, you know, as some agencies really are, not so much of a problem. So this is a really interesting in terms of the different impacts in different parts of the state and different impacts for different types of transit operators. Commuter rail systems have a really different fiscal picture than some of the bus operators in different parts of the state. But in any case, CTA put together a multi-year, approximately $5 billion relief request. And that's made up of a few components. Let me pull up the specific numbers. About 1.4 billion of that is related to appropriation of revenue from diesel sales tax. A lot of that goes to transit operations already, but there's a state general fund share, and that's where that funding would come from. An additional appropriation of unallocated cap and trade revenue. This is the single largest component of their plan. And that's $2.5 billion over 5 years. And then the conversion of up to $1.3 billion in funding for transit capital expenditures and allowing the use of that for operational expenses. And the biggest component of that is about $1 billion from the one-time general fund appropriation for transit capital that was included as part of the budget bill last year. And so there were originally going to be $2 billion each for 2 fiscal years. The governor has proposed to reduce that to $1.5 billion in the next year and $500 million each in 2 of the following years. So cutting it from $4 billion to $2 billion and delaying a little bit. And so CTA is asking for up to $1 billion in that pot. And as you can see, that's less than what the governor's proposed reducing, but we'll see what the May revise looks like. And opening that up for operators to use that for operational expenses. And so I would just, just sort of giving my opinion a little bit, I think the Assembly, if you saw our earlier report from, I think it was from March, the Assembly Budget Chair asked some really tough questions of the transit operators. There's a lot of questions about what's your vision for the future? If we're going to provide fiscal relief, what's the oversight? What's the, improvement to operations? How do you deal with issues of perceived or actual safety risk? Whereas the Senate, I think, has been a little bit more supportive in terms of making it very clear that they're interested in working with the transit operators to ensure that folks don't go over that fiscal cliff and we don't see sort of a death spiral where we have to cut service and therefore reduce revenues further. And then, you have these systems with very limited access for folks. And so as part of that, the Senate released they're calling it their Protect Our Progress plan. That was either last week or 2 weeks ago. It gets a little funny around this time of year. And part of that plan is a $10 billion, they're calling it a housing and infrastructure fund. But what it really means is the Senate is rejecting the governor's proposed cuts to housing capital, transportation, including those, the 2 rounds of $2 billion for transit and intercity rail capital, clean energy proposals, and broadband delays. And so how do they do that in the context of these revenues? Well, part of it is an increase in taxes on corporate income taxes for gross receipts over $1.5 million per year. So they're saying that's a very small percentage of taxpayers, and then they're going to offset that with a slight reduction for folks with receipts that are below that. And so really staking out a strong position of we want to continue this important capital funding. We want to work with the transit operators on operations, but also a tough conversation there about where do you find the revenue to do that in the context of this budget. The initial reaction from the governor was very negative and very quick especially on the tax provision, basically saying, I don't know why we'd want to do that in this context. And so really setting up for a bit of a showdown there between different approaches to addressing this deficit. So that's really where we're at in terms of kind of setting up the different pieces on the chessboard. As I mentioned, we will see the governor's May revise We're anticipating either Thursday or Friday this week. We will do a review of the revised, the general revenue picture, as well as the issues that are relevant to SACOG directly, and share that with your staff as soon as we're able to, the day of the budget release. And so happy to take any questions now. Otherwise, thanks for the opportunity to present.
All right, thank you for that very thorough update. Any director comments or questions at this point? All right, Director Zaragoza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, thank you for the update. Always very good and very thorough, as the chair just mentioned. Question for you. I know, this May revise is obviously going to be different than any other May revise simply because of tax receipts not matching up at the same pace because of the October deadline now. And is there any discussion of the legislature having to come back in the fall to have to do a true up on the budget? Because again, this May revise is going to be a little bit of aspirational in a sense, because we don't really know what those numbers are going to look like, as we go forward. They're just, those tax receipts aren't obviously going to be in the same way. I know we're running a deficit, but we really aren't going to know until, October and maybe later what that's going to really look like.
Yeah, I agree, and should have mentioned that. So I think it's 51 of the 58 counties now, because of the impacts of the winter storms and flooding, have that delayed filing deadline to October 16th. So the revenue picture is going to be more murky than it typically is. There is a constitutional deadline of June 15th to pass a budget in order for the legislators to continue to be paid. So they have a very strong incentive to do that. But I think it's, we'll see what the governor's projections are. But you're correct. It's going to be a very difficult year just to know what's going on, right? So there will be a budget by June 15th. I pretty strongly predict that. But when does it get reopened? Does the revenue picture improve? Does it continue to disintegrate? Those are all open questions. So I agree with you. It's unlike sort of the 10 years, 15 years ago when we were having kind of 7th, 8th, 9th extraordinary session and changing the budget, because I think the target is going to be a lot less clear. So yeah, I agree with that observation completely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Stollard. Okay, you unmute yourself. There you go.
I did. Thank you. I do appreciate the report. We heard earlier that the deficit was expected to be around $97 million. But in your presentation, I thought I heard you say it was something like 4.8 or 9 million. Is that?
That's just the cash receipts. So I think the collective, because there's a lot of additional surplus that was built into the prior year's budget. So I think we're still looking at a total budget problem of about, if the earlier January projections were in the range of like 25 billion, I believe. And so I've heard that it's going to be higher than that, but we will see those total revised numbers in April. So I think it's what I was talking about was cash versus the total expenditures versus total revenue.
Yeah, it seems like our fiscal situation and political situation are becoming as changeable as our weather. Thank you.
Changeable. Thank you. All right, any further comments? All right. Thank you all for your updates and advocacy information. All right, with that, we'll move on to information item number 7, the Transportation Development Act Triennial Performance Audit for fiscal years 2019 through 21. Carolyn, good morning. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. This is a staff's opportunity to present the most recent completion of the TDA Triennial Performance Audit. And briefly, TDA or Transportation Development Act funds provide our transit operators with operating and capital funds, as well as some non-transit funds in the cities and counties. These funds are audited annually, but the triennial performance audit is a look at the performance of these operators and also the operations of SACOG. The goal is to provide a means of evaluating performance and also offer insight into opportunities for improvement. So while it's a regulatory expectation, it's also useful for managers at SACOG, staff at SACOG, working in finance, in operations, and also for the operators to look at what they've done in the past and what they can, and offer them some insight into what they can do in the future. It's also an overall review of how we as SACOG or the operators are dispensing public funds. Now, the most recent audit was completed for all the transit operators in the 4 county regions. This only includes SATA, Yolo, Yuba, and Sacramento. Now, our review was very impressed with what we have done as a region and for our operators, despite the hardships that the operators might have mentioned. And they were also very impressed about the unmet needs process that SACOG has every year. They also provided us opportunities for improvement. 2 in the category of high priority, that means we need to look at some action plans to address those ones and to strengthen that process and oversight as SACOG. And 2 in the medium priorities for our operators. So we'll be looking at how we can support our operators into addressing some of the process and operational issues. The staff is working on these recommendations, and we will be presenting a plan of action in our next meeting in June. I'll be glad to answer and take any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Carolyn. Any directors have any comments or questions at this point? No. Any public comment? I assume not.
There's no public comment.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Carolyn. We appreciate that update on item number 7. Excellent. All right. Item number 8, the Mega Region Working Group Summary. Good morning, Dustin.
Good morning, Chair Thomas, and the rest of the directors. Good morning. My name is Dustin Foster. I'm a planner here on the SACOG transportation team and staffer for the Mega Region Working Group. I'll try to provide a brief informational update for you all this morning, get us back on track for the meeting schedule. But I want to talk about the major Mega Region Working Group activities that were conducted in April. They were really focused on state and federal funding advocacy for the shared transportation project priorities, which is the Mega Region Dozen included in the packet. They're also focused on legislative priorities such as AB 350, which was described a little bit earlier by Chris Lee. So to start, the Mega Region Advocacy Day, again, Chris Lee covered that briefly, but I just wanted to provide a little more detail on it. The working group participated in the first historic, I might add, Mega Region Advocacy Day. It was on April 19th, 2023. I don't know why I had the year there. Representatives met for the first time, really to advocate jointly for Mega Region, the project list, as well as the shared legislative priorities. All 4 of the SACOG directors attended, including our chair, Bonnie Gore, for this year, as well as directors Bradford, Joyner, and Kozlowski. Representatives Rickman and Zuber from SJCOG were in attendance, as well as Representative Spearing from MTC, as well as James. He was there, and then Diane Wynn, the executive director from SJCOG, and then a staffer from MTC, Julie Snyder. So the working group met with staff from the California State Transportation Agency, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, and Strategic Growth Council, the California Transportation Commission, and separate meetings with both the transportation committees in the state legislature for the Assembly and the Senate. So, the folks they spoke to were very impressed by kind of our mega regional efforts to coordinate and kind of share our priorities. So, we hope it's something we can do in the future. Folks really hope that it would happen, yearly. So we'll see about that, more to come. And then the Mega Region Working Group was held on April 28th. It was the second meeting, the second of 3 meetings for the year. Opening remarks at the meeting were provided by Administrator Amit Bose from the Federal Railroad Administration. He spoke on federal funding opportunities for improving passenger rail, as well as the importance of modernizing our rail infrastructure for safety and just generally to ensure that it's staying at a state of repair. Representatives provided a recap of the Mega Region Advocacy Day, and then we shifted to kind of the staff updates that I provided on the Mega Region Dozen projects. So we, regularly update the brochure that's included in the packet, just, really to show the updated funding needs, if projects descriptions change, if images or aesthetics of images are improved for these projects. We try to, update the brochure, make sure it's up to date because things change, by the month. So this included kind of a major scope amendment that was approved to update the Valley Rail project. It previously did not include the planned segment north to Chico, which would include 2 new rail stops in the SACOG region in Plumas Lake and in Marysville. So that was approved, great, a lot of support, especially from Director Bradford. And then finally, I presented kind of on looking at all the 12 projects and the funding needs for all of them, all the pending grant applications, the successful awards from the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, which was announced last week. A lot of projects in our region were funded. The one I'll really focus on is the Valley Link project, received $25 million. That's between the SJCOG region and MTC. But it received $25 million for project development. So very exciting. And it shored up a larger investment.
Oops. I think you might have frozen, Dustin. Let's see. Dustin, can you hear us?
Dustin, I'm going to turn off your video to see if that helps.
So while Jessica's working on that tech, since Dustin mentioned, I was there for the Advocacy Day. And this was Director Gore's vision, was to bring the regions together in person, get over to the state capitol, make the rounds, as Dustin said. It was really fantastic just to have common cause with our sister agencies to the south in San Joaquin County and the Bay Area and MTC. Oh, it looks like he's back. All right, Dustin.
My apologies. When did I? My apologies. When did I drop off? I am livid.
James picked up where you left off, and now you're back. So welcome back. He was talking about the Advocacy Day with Director Gore. So.
Okay, so my apologies. I was gone for a few minutes then.
Yes, so carry on.
James, where was your last point you made?
I was just trying to fill in a little bit of color commentary just at the Advocacy Day in particular, since I was part of those meetings. I thought it just went really well. I think you were wrapping up. You mentioned April 28th. We heard that the scope change on the Valley Rail. So I think we got a lot of you just but for the last 30 seconds.
Oh, great. Okay, yeah. And then, just the last, my apologies. I'm very, very sorry about that, members. But yeah, so just the last bit is we focused on the Mega Region Dozen projects and discussed the funding needs, the funding gaps, pending applications for the transit, for all the different state and federal programs, and then the one award from the Valley Link project from the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. So yeah, I guess, thank you all for your attention and your patience. And I welcome any further input from James or Christina Lockyer or Chris Lee, who are involved in Advocacy Day, or just hand it back to you, Chair. Thank you for any questions or comments. Sorry.
James, do you have any further comments to add?
I want to thank Chris Lee and Christina Lockyer just for making it all happen and getting a lot of meetings in relatively short order. It is. Chris mentioned the remote meeting legislation. Honestly, and I think many people know this, the reason this group has been able to meet since 2020 is because of Zoom. So they've been getting a lot of work done. We have this mega region dozen. It was great to be in person, but it's hard to get everybody together in person, right? Just given the geographic scope of this group. But we did that, and with Chris's and our staff's help, had a great full day making the rounds, the state capitol, and with our state agencies.
Well, kudos to all of you, because this gets back to the theme of more robust regional collaboration and the need for that. And like you say, that's a very, very hard thing to do if we rely on all of us moving to the same location. So kudos to you for such a successful effort. And this mega region working group is certainly really critical in our ability to look at our issues from a larger perspective. So thank you to everyone involved. Any other director comments, questions? Yeah, James, you had an additional comment.
I'm going to say one last thing, which is to your point, Director Chair Thomas. It was so fantastic to hear even just our 4 board members on the mega region working group, depending which meeting we were in, actually describe passionately and advocate for projects in other counties because of this mega region. And it was just, they did a great job. And it was true regionalism at its finest. So it was a really, really great day. Yeah, including a lot of folks from Placer and Yuba County, Director Villegas talking about Yolo County's projects. So if we can get that, there's nothing stopping us.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, Destin. Appreciate the update. All right, we move on to item number 9, the 2022-23 regional funding round staff recommendations. So Chris, you're up.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Let me share my screen quickly. Can you guys see my PowerPoint okay?
We can, Chris. Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. All right, so the item for you this morning is an information item presenting the staff recommendations for the 2022-2023 regional funding round. To give a kind of brief background on this project, in April 2022, the board approved the funding estimate and the program budget for the 2022-2023 regional funding round, and also the revolving match program. This funding estimate of approximately $130 million was approved to fund the regional funding programs and the community design program. That estimate was made from projected apportionments from 2025 and 2026 fiscal years, which contain a mixture of state and federal formula funding. An additional $1.7 million was added from the Sacramento Transportation Authority from their Smart Growth Incentive Program to support the matching fund requirement for Sacramento County community design applications. And then in October of last year, the board approved the program guidelines for the 3 programs: community design, maintenance modernization, and transformative, and authorized us to go out for a call for projects. To do a recap of those programs, the community design program is designed to fund transportation projects that drive land use changes, that promotes placemaking, and support the 7 original blueprint principles. And this program had a budget of approximately $13 million. The maintenance and modernization program focuses on state of good repair projects that are under $5 million that also have the additional benefits of supporting MTP SES performance outcomes. And this program has a budget of approximately $60 million. The transformative program, which is for all projects that are over $5 million or any project that includes roadway capacity increasing elements. One point of note for this program, the board approved at this October meeting to limit the budget for this program to 25% of the regional program, which limited that program budget to $28.5 million. And then not listed here, but also important that was approved in this budget was the revolving match program. This program, it's a rotating program designed to help our partners better compete for larger state and federal grants by adding a strategic amount of funding to a project. This program runs approximately twice a year and has a project cap of about $4 million. If a project is awarded for the identified program or from our program and pursues a program and is not awarded at that larger state or federal program, those funds then get pulled back off of that project. It's a conditional award and get put back into the pot for the next round for other projects to use. We wrapped up and closed the call for projects for the current round on Friday. And we received several applications, and we anticipate bringing these applications to you for conditional awards in June next month. This program also has about a $28.5 million program approximately. I'm going to move forward to the our outreach efforts. Prior to the release of these guidelines and the call for projects, SACOG staff met individually with all 19 jurisdictions in the 4-county region, and also additional funding partners of transit agencies and other JPAs to go over the program guidelines in detail and to help our agencies strategize for the projects they want to submit to our programs. We did that over there from June to October with our staff. We heard two primary issues from that outreach effort. And that was first, that staffing challenges and staff capacity for many of our jurisdictions is a huge problem, especially for our smaller jurisdictions. Staffing vacancies is still rather ongoing through our industry. And also that maintenance projects or road rehabilitation projects were still the top priority for across our jurisdictions. And that specific feedback led to the recommendation to limit the transformative program to that budget for that program to focus on more maintenance and modernization applications and projects. Additionally, after we released the call for projects, we opened up between November and December pre-application consultations for several jurisdictions. Those were open to anybody who was going to be applying. We met with several meetings on that, helping people through the application process if they had specific questions or how they should address these specific program guidelines. And several jurisdictions took us up on that. So the application due dates for the various programs were staggered from the middle of January to the first week in February. We received in total about 83 projects for almost $312 million in requests for funding. Each program, as you can see here on this table, was considerably oversubscribed. But none more is oversubscribed than the transformative program, which received 17 applications with $170 million in requests. So when applications came in, SACOG staff took those applications and screened them. We assembled the working groups, which were largely made up from a diverse group of professionals from across the region, many from your jurisdictions, and then some SACOG staff. Those working groups got to the hard work of reviewing all those 83 projects and scored and ranked them. The community design program had one working group. The maintenance and modernization program had 3 separate working groups because of the number of applications received. And the transformative program had 2 working groups. And from that time, the transformative program, also had an engineering review group that focused specifically on funding eligibility and deliverability of those larger projects. The working groups met individually, led by SACOG staff to discuss the projects in a group, and then final scores were then given to SACOG staff. Those scores were based solely on the program-specific guidelines and outcomes labeled in the guidelines. And then staff compiled those working group findings into a final recommendation, which is before you today. So the recommendations are listed as attachments A and B on the staff report. Attachment A is the summary table of the awards. And that attachment B includes a more in-depth project description with some preliminary feedback from the working groups. I'll also note that included in the summary table are awards for the 3 revolving match program or projects that were awarded in August of last year. One being the West Sacramento project for $1.5 million, which was did secure its request for funding to the statewide ATP program, so that has been confirmed. And then 2 other projects which are still awaiting decisions from the SB1 competitive programs of congested corridors and local participation program, which we expect those announcements later on next month. For the staff recommendations, we are recommending funding a total of 42 projects, almost half of the projects that were submitted to us. 19 of those projects are in the community design category. 15 of those are non-competitive, 4 competitive. 17 projects from the maintenance and modernization program, and 6 projects from the transformative program. These recommendations include some great innovations in transit, including the initial funding for the region's first BRT corridor, several active transportation projects across the region, but also for some much needed road rehabilitation throughout the 4-county area. Prior to the release of the agenda packet and the release of the information of the awards, staff did reach out to all applicants, whether they were successful or not, to notify them personally of the recommendations. And with that became an offer to any jurisdiction for any application that was unsuccessful to do a more in-depth debrief on those applications so that we can help them for either the next round for SACOG funding or to help those for other funding opportunities. So we're always happy to work with our jurisdictions to help their projects and applications improve. And we are now scheduling those for the end of May and into June at this point. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions that the committee will have.
Thank you, Chris. Boy, this item certainly is a result of a tremendous amount of work, both in terms of the application and the review. So thank you for your information on this. Director Desmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, or Madam Chair, and thank you, Chris, for the presentation and all the work of staff. I know this is a really heavy lift and very difficult when you're on a regional body like this, and everybody is has a big need, certainly in the areas that they represent. I had a question. So this will kind of, this information today, we're not taking action on this, obviously, but what is this will be voted on by the Transportation Committee, or has that already happened?
So yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to include that. The Transportation Committee last Thursday voted unanimously to pass these recommendations onto the board, and they'll be going in front of the board on May 18th for final recommendation and adoption.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And I was looking at the list for Sacramento County, and I, again, I preface it with what I just said a couple minutes ago about how difficult this process is. I understand that, but you mentioned, road rehabilitation had been identified as a top priority, and certainly that's a top priority for Sacramento County. I noticed, I'm looking at, is there a reason that none of the overlay projects that were requested by Sacramento County were approved? I mean, was there something fundamentally wrong with those applications in your opinion, or why is that? Because that just really jumps out at me.
Sure, I can completely understand that. And again, we've offered the county a much more in-depth, and with the number of applications the county submitted, that'll be a very long, if not a couple of meetings to go through. Generally, the projects that scored well in those categories did 2 things. It was demonstrated a need for state of good repair for road rehabilitation. These projects definitely did that, but we also asked them to speak to up to 2 different other performance outcomes. And those performance outcomes are things like improving multimodal access, economic benefits, congestion, relief, things of that nature. And so the applications that did score well for those really did articulate the how they were solving multiple problems with one overlay project.
Okay, I appreciate that. What I'd like to do, Chris and James, maybe with Christina as well, have a meeting with Ron Vicari, our DOT director, because I'd like to talk about this in a little more detail with you, outside of just the regular meetings with staff and Sac County. And for my colleagues, the reason I bring this up, and just kind of to frame it up for you, unincorporated Sacramento County, which is about 600,000 people. We have probably closer to a $900 million maintenance backlog in our roadways. And the roadways that are in the worst shape are in the poorest neighborhoods. You know, in neighborhoods that have been identified as environmental justice communities. And that's why this is such a priority for us in the county. So, James, I know staff will be doing their own, you know, meetings with our county DOT, but I'd like to have a meeting at our level with Vicari and maybe Chris and Christina. And if I could have maybe my office reach out to you to have that discussion. So I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Thank you, Director Desmond. Appreciate that. All right. Are there any other director comments or questions of Director Stollard?
Chair Thomas, I just want to say absolutely, right? I mean, that's the, I hope, as you know, and Chris walked through the sort of the pre-process application period where we weren't actually taking meetings during the live, you know,
right.
And then the post, right? So in terms of the post, I want to make just sure everybody understands here. And Christina, it looked like maybe you were coming off mute too, but we will make ourselves available to any and all, right? Because part of what we are trying to do here is have our entire region, as we were talking about earlier, with the mega region, everything else, right, be not just competitive in a regional funding round, but competitive at a state level and a federal level as well. So yes and yes.
Good. Excellent.
Thank you. Thank you, James.
Very worthwhile discussions, like you say, the very complex process, and these are also critical conversations that we need to have. So thank you for that. Director Stollard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do appreciate Director Desmond's comments on the process, and it was extensive. I understand that, but we in Woodland are really unhappy. We've received nothing in either the repair category or the transformative category, essentially getting only what would have been our allocation anyway under the first category. So we're the only two jurisdictions in the whole region that are in that situation. So we're not happy. And, I don't question the fairness of the process, but and I know we want to be merit-based in how we make these decisions, but for two of our jurisdictions to essentially get nothing for state of repair or transformative does not seem particularly equitable to us, at least not to me. And, out here where we are on the western end of the region, we live with the consequences of all the traffic that comes to Sacramento Airport, which is now backing up traffic on I-5 all the way to Woodland, more than occasionally, and plus all the Metro Air Park truck traffic coming from the Bay Area. They're not going to use they're not going to use 505. They're coming up 113, and they have to go on our surface streets to transfer to 5 South. So we asked for just at least a token amount to show that this project remains a viable project of importance to the region. We are working independently in other funding sources, but we were very, very disappointed in this. I've already let James know that. I would expect SACOG staff to be alert to these considerations and make sure that we get at least something. But again, we got nothing. So I'm not going to vote for this. I'll abstain, but I'm not going to vote for it.
Director, Chair Thomas, do you mind if I?
Please do. Please do. These are important conversations.
You referenced our conversation, right? And I absolutely understand where you're coming from in terms of putting in an application or, feeling like you didn't get anything. And you mentioned just a second ago, we want to be merit-based. And I think everybody understands this by now, but we want to be merit-based. We have to be merit-based. We've just went through a federal corrective action, right? There is no, and when we review these applications, while we really have to, and one of the questions for the funding round working group going forward, right, which Christina Svensk is leading, is how do we make sure it is fair and equitable? But with the federal corrective action that I think has really clarified what we are able to do and what we cannot do, we cannot say everybody gets something. You just can't do that. Right. And we don't sit around as staff and say, boy, everybody needs a little something. Let's give Woodland, a little something. We just cannot do that. What we can do, though, is what I have suggested to you and earlier, just a second ago with Director Desmond, which is regroup, sit down with you and your staff, right, and figure out how is this project going to be competitive, right? How can we help you get the resources it needs? And I will say, among many that I have seen in my time here at 6 years at SACOG, Sutter County last time was in a similar position. They got shut out, so to speak. We worked with them very closely, actually came in with a different project. They put a lot of effort into that and it got recommended for funding here. So I know that can change. There's many, but I do want to be very clear in case people are wondering, you know, how the process works. And if we can sort of help folks out, we would love to help you out. The one way we cannot help you out is say everybody gets a little something. That would run afoul of the federal corrective act.
I'll accept that feedback, but at the same time, this particular project, I-5-113, was on the projects of regional significance at SACOG in the last century. And of the 20 projects that were on that list for many, many years, 19 of them got completed, but this one didn't. I would appreciate some SACOG staff leadership to help us get this project done. I've been speaking up about it for a long time. I've been patient for a long time. I feel like we need more help than we're getting, James. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Director Villegas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I know the answer, but under the City of West Sacramento I Street deck conversion, it's a bit grainy. There are double asterisks there. I'm assuming that's a joint partnership, City of West Sacramento, because it's not a city bridge. That's a UP bridge, and just for my own edification, is that accurate or?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, it is a joint project. The city of Sacramento takes the lead on the larger replacement bridge. The West Sacramento is taking the lead on the conversion of the existing bridge.
Good enough. All right. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on this informational item? First of all, I want to thank everyone for their comments. You know, it is so important that as a board and as a committee that we are willing to come to, you know, if we talk about regionalism, we must be willing to come together with mutual respect and ask these hard questions. And that's part of the magic of SACOG, is our ability to work respectfully with each other to articulate the challenges of this very complex collaboration, so we can most effectively advocate not only for our individual cities and counties, but our region as a whole. So I just commend each and every one of you for your ability to do that and encourage us to do more of that, so we can, you know, identify places where we need to do better, and all in service to our region. So thank you all, and to our staff for working with our member jurisdictions to do that. So appreciate it.
Thank you.
So as we come to a close, is there any other matter for the good of the order, or any other director comments or staff comments? James, do you have anything else you'd like to add today?
Just a reminder, I know some of you have signed up, but we, speaking of the blueprint and the region, we have a big workshop coming up in Folsom on June 16th. That's 9 a.m. to noon. If you have not signed up, please sign up and spread the word. When you go back and report to your councils and boards, let folks know it is a truly regional event. Right after that will actually be a 5th anniversary celebration of the Youth Leadership Academy. We have been at that now for 5 years. I think we're going to have some youth at the morning event, but from noon to 1:30 right after that, that'll be a bit smaller. So that is a little more space limited, but we'd love to have you there. We're going to have a number of our alumni and our graduates of the Youth Leadership Academy. So please do join us for that. Also on June 16th, also at the same location, Folsom.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Director Zaragoza.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one thing I wanted to bring up, and it was alluded to a little bit during our advocacy update, and that's the debt limit conversation. You know, we're, you know, in a lot of years, you always sort of go up to the brink, and then there's either a deal or a short-term, 30 more days, 60 more days. This year is a little unique because I think there's a lot of built-in factors that may push us over the edge on that conversation, if you will. I hope not, but I think that is something we're going to have to look out from, you know, what that means to us from any federal funded projects, what that does to things going forward. So it is something I wanted to put on, James, just for you to think about as staff, you know, as we look to see, you know, if we need to have a refresher or just what may happen if we get to that point where we actually pass, where, you know, we're now at a point where the government's defaulted because of debt limit. Because I think of all the years, this, you know, and working in this industry, I think this is the one year where I really feel, you know, outside of, you know, 1994, when this, I think the last time, you know, I think there's a serious chance it could happen again.
Thank you for that caution, Director Zaragoza. So, all right. So with that, we will adjourn, and the next meeting will be held on Monday, June 5th. Just to tell the committee, I will be on a plane that day, so I'll touch base with Director Burris to see if she can share that meeting. But so I won't be with you at the next one, but thank you all for being with us today and for our staff, and have a wonderful week, and thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Jessica.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Wendy.
Bye-bye.